Obviously, we'd like to still be playing, but as we look at things, we feel like we had a great season with a disappointing ending. The team that we finished with, obviously, is not necessarily the team that we are. But given the reality of the situation with the injury, we've always taken the approach that you're going to face things that are out of your control, but you have to deal with them, and you still got to come to work the next day, and you have to perform to your standards. That's how we've looked at things since day one, and that's the way we continue to look at things. As I've said before, and we've talked about here, nothing's ever promised in this league. And every year is unique to itself. So, as we take stock of what this season means to our team, I think it's as valuable as any other season we've had, and it's going to contribute to the continued evolution of our organization, and also as our team going forward. So I don't think that we can lose sight of that at all. With that being said, I think our team matured again, and I thought the character of the team was demonstrated not only through the 82 games, but also obviously as we got to the postseason. We showed a lot of growth on the floor. Obviously, the continued improvement and development of our core players has allowed us to continue to grow and evolve as a collective unit as well, which was positive. I think there's been a little bit of a breakthrough in terms of our efficiency and the recognition of efficiency versus just production on its own. And to be in the top 5 in offensive and defensive efficiency is not something that we take for granted, and it's something that we want to try to hold on to that if we can as we move forward. I also think that the communication within the team, on the floor, off the floor, has continued to grow, which is a positive thing. As we've talked about in years past, high-performing teams, one of the traits of those teams is communication, and I think our team is continuing to improve in that area. And then I think the day-to-day mentality that our players have adopted since day one here in Oklahoma City served us well. Going through some really good times over the 82 games, kind of keeping us grounded and humble, but also when we got some unfortunate, unforeseen events, I think it serves us well in those respects as well. We've talked quite a bit recently about the challenges of sustaining success in the NBA and in sports in general, and there's a lot of those challenges. A lot of them aren't necessarily even on the court or on the field, for that matter. But it's one thing to win in the NBA, and it's another thing to win under varying conditions over a long period of time. And obviously, the goal of our organization is to be good for a long period of time. And if you achieve that, there's just no way that you're going to have successive seasons that go exactly the way that you want, or are devoid of unforeseen events or unfortunate circumstances. But that's why I think the elite teams and elite organizations have the quality of recovery. You have to be able to accept that those things are real, deal with them, and then continue to press on. And that's what I'm confident that we'll do. And as I said, we'll learn from this season like we have every other. As we go forward, I think we have to be pragmatic about how we look at the team, for sure. As I said, the team that we played 82 games with and headed into the playoffs with is unfortunately not the team we finished with. And that's not an excuse, but that's just a reality. So we have to be really clear about how we look at things moving forward, and be careful that we don't allow the last 2 weeks of the season or the recency of the last two weeks to necessarily impact our decision making and impact us for the next 2 years. So we'll have to spend a lot of time, I think, thinking through things carefully and diligently as we determine what the next steps are for our team going forward. As we said, it's a 60-win team in the regular season with a core of young players that are hard workers and high character people. That gives us optimism. Obviously, we expect those players, on our roster to continue to grow and evolve. And that's the reason why we've chosen to take the path of building a team in this way and having it constituted, because we feel like by staying true to that process, we'll continue to grow and be able to absorb some things along the way. That's part of sports, as I said, when we got the news on Russell's injury. So in summation, I'd say that I'm proud of our team. I'm proud of our people. This off season, we're going to look at everything we can to try to improve, but we also need to take into consideration our parameters and consider the short-term and long-term impact as we make decisions going forward. But that's been no different than we have any other season. But this has been another step in the evolution of the team. As I said earlier, we're going to use it for what it is, because each season is unique into itself and has a place in the history of the organization. And we're very proud of the fact that we had this year. I'm very proud of the people that contributed to that, and we have to understand that every mile of the marathon is run at a different pace, and this one we'll learn from as well.
Questions, guys?
Sam, with more and more teams, the evolution of the NBA appearing to move more and more towards small ball, how valuable is Kendrick Perkins to this franchise right now?
Well, I think if you look at just the best teams in the league, they are able to play several different ways. And, for us, obviously Perk, provides us somebody that we feel like is an elite post defender. As I said earlier, when you're in a playoff series or you're an elite team that's motoring through an 82-game season, it doesn't necessarily mean that, the benefit of being a good team is that you have different faculties on your team that can be used in different situations. And we feel really fortunate that we have not only Perk, but a lot of our other players that can play in different lineups. And I think that's one of our strengths of our team.
Just wanted to get your thoughts on Kevin's leadership this year. Seemed like he took a big step in that department.
Well, first, we're incredibly fortunate to have, we've always talked about him as a player and also as a person, but I think to have someone like that in our organization, but also in our community, is a great thing, and certainly not something to be taken for granted, and isn't taken for granted by anybody. But I think his leadership, it was in a different classification, over the last 2 weeks, and I was really impressed with it, quite honestly. And I think it's easy, to step to the front when you're winning 60 games in the regular season, and assume that position as a leader. It's a different situation when you're hit with something that's unexpected, and have to take that leadership responsibility on and accept it, and be accountable for it. And I think he did an excellent job of that, and very, very happy to be able to say that.
Back to Perk, Sam. His offense clearly was a disaster in the last since Russell got hurt, really. You said you don't want to make any decisions based on the last 2 weeks because it's not the team. Individually, can you make any kind of determination, or is every individual affected to the point you can't even do that?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was getting at, Barry. I think that we have to be really pragmatic about how we finished, and understand how that how that situation could have affected the different layers of the team. That's not to say we can't learn things from the series. I think we can pull a lot of things. There were some things that were really positive that took place, over the playoffs, quite honestly. And especially, when we think about how close those games were, there's definitely things that we can pull and try to assimilate. But I would say that individually, collectively, we have to give it some distance and really get away from the recency of the situation, to understand who we are and who we are coming back, and how best to improve upon that.
So will you consider using the amnesty provision on Perkins?
Yeah, obviously, I know that's a topic that's been talked about, and for us, the amnesty application provision is not something that we've really ever considered as an organization. I understand that, you know, it's something that's, as I said before, is talked about quite a bit, and organizationally, it's not something that we've considered. We've got several players that would be eligible based on the new CBA. And I'd be happy to talk about it, you know, if I could help anybody understand it better. You know, generally speaking, not necessarily in pertinence to us, but if anyone wants me to explain the application so that everyone understands kind of how it's constituted, how teams look at it, teams that do use it, why they use it, I'd be happy to do that, but I also don't want to waste time talking about something that we're not or haven't really considered.
Why do teams use it?
Okay.
Generally, it seems to be cap relief or tax relief.
Yeah, I think there's, you know, basically the way that provision is used is, you know, generally it's used when teams are under the salary cap. Now there's a difference between the tax and the cap. But when you're under the cap, it's generally used to increase flexibility and use it as a roster building tool. Now, when you're under the cap, by connotation, it also means that your payroll and your cash payment is at a different level. So therefore, you'd be able to absorb a full salary of a player, and it might be more beneficial because you'll be able to exceed that player's salary based on the salary cap space that you're using. So generally, teams are using those provisions as under the cap teams. Now, the other way that you can use the provision is if you're over the tax. You can use it anytime, but history shows that teams generally use it as an economic tool also. So if you're over the tax and you find that paying the full salary of the player is more beneficial financially than taking on the tax amount as well as the full salary, then you can use it in that facet. So therefore, you'd pay an X amount for team salary, but you're really actually saving twice the amount or even more depending on how punitive and what level of the tier your tax that you're in could actually cost. I could get into the realm of in between the tax and the cap, the exceptions that are triggered and lost as a result of operating in that zone, but we'd be here all day. But just for understanding, it's generally under the cap, over the tax. And then, of course, the revenue of the team with each situation, I think, comes into play. You've seen some teams use it more aggressively, depending on probably kind of where they can get to from a cash standpoint. And other teams use it minimally to try to, you know, make a minor move here or there. But it's very relative to kind of where you stand and generally under or over the tax or under the cap.
So back to Perk. What you're saying is you're not under the cap, but you're also not over the tax currently. So it doesn't really.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily
fit the history of what's happened.
Yeah, well, I would separate the two. We just haven't considered using the provision. I wouldn't necessarily attribute that directly to any player on our team. So, you know, every team looks at the amnesty provision different based on their different circumstances, but it's not something that we've really explored.
So if you don't use it on Perk this summer, it's not because it's an economic reason, it's because you want Perk back?
Well, we think Perk has a lot of value to our team. Obviously, you know, he's a member of a team that, you know, won 60 games and helped us to our third division title in 3 years. You know, I don't know that we can discount that. Obviously, you know, I'm sure he'd like to have had a better postseason, but I think that's pretty universal for the whole group. And, you know, we accept that. And no one's running from the fact that we feel like, you know, we could certainly still be playing. But at the end of the day, you know, Memphis was the better team in that series, and we tip our hat to them, and you know, we go into the offseason and see how we can improve.
When the guys came in here, Serge, one of those guys in particular talked about how with Russell gone, he saw things in his own game he wanted to improve on. Did you get that from the players that maybe they saw things in their individual that they hope to work on this summer?
Yeah, well, I think you're going to see that each year with a team that's evolving like we have. You know, each guy is going to have certain goals and things they want to work through and work on. I don't know that necessarily not having one particular player on the court is going to make guys work harder or recognize things. I think from my experience in those meetings, everybody has things they want to work on year after year. And that's one of the benefits of having a group of guys that we feel like are driven internally to try to get better. But certainly, the timing of when that injury took place was unfortunate because it didn't allow for a whole lot of time to adjust or adapt. But as I said before, that's sports, and you can't control those types of things, but you do have to deal with them. And I think we dealt with them the best that we could, and we'll be better for it.
Is this team unique in the level of self-motivation that the players demonstrate, where they self-study and identify areas where they'd like to improve?
It's hard for me to say, Brian, only because I'm not with all the other teams. So I can only compare us to our own standards internally, and I prefer that, quite honestly. But we feel good about the fact that we've got a group of guys that work hard. I think Reggie Jackson's development over the last 2 years has been an example of that. I'll give you a quick story that illustrates that. We were playing in the finals in Miami, and it was, I cannot remember which game it was, but I came out on the court before the game, as I usually do, just to kind of watch the warm-up a little bit. And he was, at the time, was not an active player. We had brought Derek in, and he was out there in one of those long sleeve gray workout shirts, and it was just covered in sweat. I mean, drenched. And if there was ever a day where he probably could have slid by on the workout, it probably was before, game 4 or 5 in the postseason, in the finals. And that was in Miami. And then, if you flip to this season, we're there on Christmas Day, and that's the day that Reggie Jackson's heard his name called for the first time. And, I think that his performance, starting at that point in time was not a matter of that particular day, but really just the work that had gone into that previously. I just thought it was ironic that on a day where he certainly could have probably slid by, in that particular arena is the day where he's called upon to be ready. And, he sees the opportunity. Obviously, unfortunate circumstances in which he was, thrust into real action. But I think it bodes well that he was able to handle that situation and perform. But it's not a matter of one day. It's really the preparation of a period of years.
One more on Perk for me. Is the Perk that you have now, or that you've had the past couple of years, is it the Perk that you thought you were signing to an extension? Because statistically in Boston, he was a lot more productive.
Sure. I mean, look, I could sit here and read off, a lot of internal metrics that would indicate his impact on the performance of the other team when he's on the floor. That's not what you guys want to hear, and certainly, not something that we need to trumpet in front of you. Look, he's a guy that's contributed to this team over the past 3 years. He would like to play at a higher level in the postseason than he did. But at the same time, I think that could be said for a lot of our guys. And I think he was going to go back and work and come back, improved. But he does things that we value, and against certain teams that we have to go through on a nightly basis. But as I said before, there's going to be situations where, he's called upon, and there's going to be situations where, as we saw in the Houston series, where his contribution might be different. But he's a part of the group that's had success, and we value that. We don't split that up and weight it based on 8 games or things of that nature. We look at it a little more holistically, and collectively.
Sam, you don't have to use that Toronto draft pick next month. Have you guys made a decision on whether you will utilize it this season?
Well, the draft for us has always been really important, for a myriad of reasons. And we're certainly going to look at it. I don't know that we can determine that until we get a better feel for, who will be there, that particular night. But we'll be open-minded about everything. If there's someone there we feel like fits our team, and we can help them and they can help us, then we wouldn't hesitate to use it there. At the same time, I'm sure there'll be some interest in it in trade discussions, but it's a little too early to say.